Hello, welcome to the Under Center podcast. I'm your host, Dara Marr, and I'm joined by two of the latest undrafted free agent signings with the North Dublin Pirates, Fionn Malloy and Jake Woolhead. Lads, you didn't get drafted this past weekend, but you still found a team in the end.
Yeah, managed to go to the hometown team, the North Dublin Pirates, starting running back, obviously immediately gone into that role. So we'll see if we can get the MVP this year.
Yeah, signed a great contract for a few marshmallows, so I'm delighted.
Brilliant. So, look, listen, they got three good signings because I'm going to go back to be the star nose tackle now for next season too. I missed out on my sophomore year. I'm going to get it back now this year, hopefully, COVID or no COVID. But anyway, it is the week after the draft, and on today's show, we're going to be talking about what happened last weekend, focusing mostly on the Washington football team and the NFC East at large. And with us on the show today is Washington football insider and host of the After Practice podcast, Lake Lewis. Lake, how are you?
Well, I appreciate you guys having me on. It must be really late over there at this point. So, I definitely appreciate you having me on.
Sure, 9 p.m. is a usual time for us to record. It's absolutely fine. We got to get used to the American market. Thank God you're on the East Coast rather than the West.
Yeah, we actually covered the first round of the draft, and that was a late one. That was like 5:30 in the morning. It was finished that for us. So, yeah. We're used to the long ones.
Yeah, it was rough for me that night. I mean, we're on the East Coast. We didn't talk to Ron Rivera until almost 1 a.m. So
oh my goodness. Yeah.
Well, to be fair, it was great being a Seahawks fan. You didn't have to talk to anyone those beat reporters on the first night. They just got to chill out, not worry about anything. Maybe just the number 3 pick was the only thing they had to worry about that night.
I told you all it wasn't going to be Mac Jones.
Of course not.
But listen, guys, we are on YouTube, and if you are watching us on YouTube, can you please like this video and subscribe to the Dynamo Podcast Network? That is where you will find each and every show we upload whenever we upload it. If you prefer the audio version, just do the exact same thing wherever you get your podcast. Just search Dynamo Podcast Network. You'll find us there so you can listen to us on the go wherever you are going off to. But let's get into this past weekend's draft. And we'll start with the first round, Lake. And a lot of talk leading up to it was, would Washington draft up to get a quarterback? Would one actually fall to them in spot number 20? It didn't materialize in the end. What did you make of the first night in general?
I thought it was a really good night for the team. They took the guy that I was on a ESPN outlet last week, right before the draft, and they do a mock every year. And, I was picking 19 for Washington, and obviously you have to take what's available, but it just so happened to be that I took Jamin Davis. And I thought that, he would be there for them. I know that they really, really wanted a middle linebacker to shore up the already really good defense, just to get an athletic guy with speed in the middle. Because let's face it, that was the most vulnerable part of that defense last year. So to be able to walk away, with this guy after your first pick, and hoping that he could be entrenched there for the next, decade or so, I think it was a great move for Washington.
Yeah, I think so. And I think what really, we had been mock draft quite a lot of players or across the board that I saw across all the different networks. So I think we went for a value pick in a position where it was difficult to find really top end talent. From your experience on the ground, how seriously or how close did the Washington football team come to trading up to try and go after a quarterback? Or did they feel, given when the first 3 guys were gone, that maybe the talent level was a little bit too big of a drop off and that they would be happy with the quarterback room that they had at the moment and maybe take a shot next year?
Yeah, I think, pretty much everything you said summed it up. I mean, they discussed it. I mean, clearly you have to discuss it with you,
of course,
in the draft. Yeah. But realistically, they feel comfortable with what they have in the room. And with that being said, I tell people this all the time. They were 7-9 last year with 4 different starting quarterbacks. That just doesn't happen in the NFL. They were 7-9 on top of that, not just 4 different quarterbacks, but quarterbacks that were getting injured, and then a quarterback that just wasn't ready to hit the field at all. So if you think, listen, Alex Smith was 5-1 as a starter, as a shell of himself. Imagine if Alex Smith were able to have started 16 games. There's no reason for me to believe that team wouldn't have won 10 football games, bare minimum. They were in 2 games with what they had, and they lost, to Detroit. They lost a overtime game to the Giants. That puts you at 9 right there with 4 different quarterbacks. So again, I think they feel like that defense was so good last year, and it could get even better. You get Matt Ioannidis back. You have your draft pick. So now they're looking at it like the defense should take another step from being really good to becoming, borderline great. And then on top of that, you got a couple weapons on offense now. You bring in Curtis Samuel. Naturally, you have Ryan Fitzpatrick you brought in. And then on top of that, your draft. You draft a couple of guys that you really believe can give this team on offense a boost, especially De'Ami Brown from North Carolina. So I don't think they were really looking to trade out of that spot by any means. I mean, they got the number 1 defensive player that was on their board, so they won out in this in the long run.
Yeah, and moving on, maybe out of the first round, looking at the draft class that Washington got in total, how well do you feel like they addressed the needs? Obviously, we already talked about quarterback, but I think Ron Rivera is definitely going to be happy with Ryan Fitzpatrick, certainly for a year, and maybe if he can convince him for a couple of years if he doesn't like the quarterbacks in next season's draft. But how well in general do you think outside of that did they address the needs that they had?
It's just funny for me to see Jake's facial expressions up there.
Yeah, he's really hoping. See, Jake was a Ryan Fitzpatrick fan before Washington signed him, so now he's not allowed to be a Fitzpatrick fan.
No,
so now
I've said it before. I've said it before. Like, he's a guy that will lead you for 3 wins, and then you will lose 4 in a row. So you might have to move on to your second-tier quarterback after Ryan Fitzpatrick shows his face.
Well, I was expecting to come on your show, Irish guys, Fitzpatrick, and I don't see any of the love. So no, but
there was a lot of love before he joined the football team, I have to say.
There's a lot of love for that beard as well.
Oh yeah. But truthfully, he's I think you have to go back to what I would consider to be his best year, Ryan Fitzpatrick, and that was ironically when he was with the Jets. They went 10-6, and they had a top 5 defense that year. So they didn't need him to throw the ball 400 times, So, you go back a couple years ago when he was in Tampa, I mean, he was throwing the ball 40, 50 times a game. That's not going to happen here this year. They're going to, the way they've orchestrated and built up this offensive line, brought back Eric Flowers. They drafted Cosme from Texas as a start. He's going to be their starting left tackle from day one. So, now you have not just your starting unit, but you have quality depth to go across this line, which tells me that they're going to try to smash them up people. They're going to try to run the football. What is Ryan Fitzpatrick great at? Throwing the ball deep. So now you have 3 receivers that are sub 4.4 guys, and McLaurin, Samuel, and Brown filled. It's offense. Serve it to set up. The defense is what's going to carry the until franchise cross right now.
And kind of, if we're going to put a bit of pressure on you now, obviously, you told us that you picked Jamin Davis in your mock draft. Outside of that, looking at maybe some of the lower round guys that the Washington drafted, who do you think is going to be the diamond in the rough? Who's the guy that in 2-3 years' time we're going to be looking at? Wow, that was amazing value to get him where they did in that draft.
Clearly, not. I mean, he's a guy. I mean, he's got some size, 200 pounds. Can play multiple on the field. They can get him out wide. Maybe throw some bubbles. Trying to he going north south, and it worked. Develop a pass, like a route tree, something to hone in on his skills. I think he's going to be a steal. I think he was one of the steals in this draft. And then on top of that, I know it's second round, and you say your second round, you're supposed to do well. But the tackle Cosme was a first round grade to a lot of us. And when he kept falling and falling, I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on here? Something, did they all of a sudden find out some kind of medical report or something like that? It wasn't anything to do with that. It was just there was so many quarterbacks in this draft, and so many receivers in this draft. It just naturally pushed down what we call over here the big uglies. It pushed them down a little bit, but for them to walk away in the second round with their starting left tackle, that's a steal too. So I think they've had a really good draft, and they're going to have a couple guys 2-3 years from now. We're going to look back and say, man, how'd they pull this off?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one guy that stood out for me that I thought was quite interesting was Cameron Cheeseman, given that our long slapper has left, and we do have one of the best punters in the game, arguably one of the best players on our team for the last few seasons. So I think getting a replacement in there and keeping that special teams going as hot as it has been is going to be very good for Washington in the future.
Oh, that's an excellent point, because one of the mainstays, obviously, I've been saying for the last couple of years, up until last year, of course, because it was Chase Young or some other defensive players, but I kept saying Washington's best player is Tress Way, their punter.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So naturally, Nick Sundberg was instrumental in that as the long snapper. He's no longer here, so for him to go and get Cheeseman, I think was a great move on top of that too, because whoever that long snapper is, that's going to be their only job. They're not backing up anyone on the offensive line. They're not expected to go down on special teams and tackle. They're not expected to do anything but long snap the ball. So to get a specialist at that in Cheeseman, I think is a good move. And now he's a guy that perhaps can be on the roster for a decade or so.
And certainly a contender for best name in the NFL.Draft of 2021, that's for sure.
It's up there, that's for sure. If he was in Green Bay, it would be perfect.
I'm glad Jake spoke up there a little bit, because I'd like to move on to the Giants now briefly. And if you could please explain.
Fionn, before you do, sorry, I just want to ask one more question about Washington, and just in the later rounds, especially round 7, they actually drafted 2 defensive ends. So sort of making the rich richer, you could say, on that defensive line for sure. But was it I know they're getting more on the end, but maybe they needed a few more bodies probably on the interior.
No. They remember, they're bringing back Matt Ioannidis, and for my money, Matt Ioannidis has been their best interior lineman defensively for the last 4 years. Problem, with Matt is he's got such a high motor and plays so hard, he gets hurt and hasn't been able to have a complete season yet. So, if they can get a full season from Matt Ioannidis to pair up with Tim Settle, who's also in the middle, Deron Payne, who's in the middle, and then you can move Jonathan Allen in there. So those guys are interchangeable. So I think that getting him back, now you just don't have 3, you have 4, and you only need 2 out on the field at one time. So I think that they're going to be okay at that position. As far as the 2, rookie ends that they drafted, one of them's from my school, Penn State, Shaka Toney, and Shaka's got a lot of potential. He's athletic. He can come around with some speed. And I thought that was a good draft for them, good move for Washington, because naturally people, some fans were like, why would they take another, pass rusher when you have Montez Sweat on one side and Chase Young on the other? Well, the question is, what's behind them? Because Ryan Kerrigan's not here. So, you still need some depth, because let's face it, Chase Young missed a game or 2 last year. So if one of those guys were to go out, it would change the total dynamic of this defense. So if you can develop another person to go along with them, because that's a rotational position, I think it just makes the defense more formidable.
So maybe going back to my original question before Dara's excellent question, I wanted to do a bit of bashing of the New York Giants and Jake here, and I wanted you to please explain to him how they completely messed up this draft. They didn't address any of their needs except for outside linebacker. They signed a running back behind Barkley, which they definitely needed. They signed a wide receiver that they definitely needed after signing Golladay, and they signed multiple cornerbacks, which I suppose you could argue is a need for them, but signing them in the late rounds is probably not ideal. So, if you could confirm that I am in fact correct and that Jake needs to be extremely worried.
Before you go on, I just want to get a gum shield, because I feel like I'm gonna get a bashing here, so I need to protect myself.
Actually, you might be surprised, because I've been telling people that I truly believe this, that Washington and the Giants are the two best teams in the NFC East.
Oh,
That's really
100%.
Yeah.
that's my honest assessment. And as of today, right now as we speak, you give the edge to the reigning NFC East champion just by a little bit, but the Giants are right there. And it would not surprise me if the Giants win that division because they did help themselves. And I actually thought they had a decent draft. I really did. I thought Gettleman drafted for his life this year.
Yeah,
And
he sure
you
did.
know, I mean, did they go a little higher for Kadarius Toney than I thought a team would? Well, just a tad, but I thought he was a first round talent. And I mean, he's a guy that I love, by the way. I mean, they were my two favorite players in this draft by far were Michael Parsons and Kadarius Toney. So when the Giants, got Kadarius, and then of course the Cowboys got Michael Parsons, I didn't know which side I wanted to throw up on. So, also with the Giants, they get help from the defensive player from Georgia. That's a good look for them. Maybe some of these names aren't household names outside of Tony, but you go back to their free agency. For them to pick up a nice receiver, from Detroit. You think about all the moves that they've made. So now when you look at this offense, everyone knows what it's going to come down to. It's going to come down to Daniel Jones. He's got the weapons now, so there's no more excuses. You look at your wide receivers, and you have Kadarius Toney, you have Shepard. I'm missing someone on the outside.
Kenny
Galloway.
Golladay, Darius
Galladay,
Slayton.
yeah, and Slayton. So you have four really good receivers, and then you bring back your best offensive player, Saquon Barkley. I know they brought in a running back, but I also liked Wayne Gallman. I did. I think that Joe Judge is actually he's developing a nice culture up there in New York as well. And I think that the Giants and Washington are the teams that are set up for long-term success. The Cowboys, yeah, they have a lot of offense. They bring back that. They couldn't stop anybody. And Michael Parsons alone isn't going to be able to, he's going to make a difference. Don't get me wrong, but he's not going to catapult them from the worst rushing defense to number one. It's not going to happen. So I like the Giants move, to be honest with you.
Fionn, you best know I'm cutting that into a little video, and I'm gonna keep sending that to you every week. That a fellow football team fan has said that the Giants did well. That is just music to my ears.
Yeah,
I have to do my job.
Lake's too professional. He's too professional. He did an analysis and he liked it. You survived that one, Jake, but I'll get you again.
Well,
Moving on.
obviously, when the Eagles trade up and they pick Devontae Smith, just one pick ahead of us, that kind of put I was like, oh no, who's Gettleman going to draft now? 8 seasons, he's never traded back once. He trades back 10 places, gets himself a first round next year, a third round next year, fourth this year. I was like, that's beautiful. No, I don't care who he drafts at 20 anymore because it's not as important now. But it is planning for the future for the Giants now, which is good. They have guys on 3-year contracts, not so many of these 1-year contracts that happened so much this year because of the lower cap. So if Daniel Jones isn't the guy, we can trade up, we can get a new quarterback, and we still have good offensive weapons. So I'm really happy with that.
Or you could, bring in a free agent quarterback. I mean, there's options there. I mean, and I didn't even mention Evan Ingram, who had a Pro Bowl year, tight end. So there's weapons all over the Giants' offense. They still need to get a little better on the offensive line, I think. That's naturally another possession, a next step for them. But yeah, I mean, when the Eagles traded up, the thing that I was surprised about, Washington traded with Philadelphia later in the draft. The Eagles and Cowboys traded up with each other. The Giants traded, with Philly. I mean, I'm like, what is this? This is the NFC East. Normally, I don't care under any circumstance if it's going to make me better, but if it's going to make you better as well, I'm not doing it.
I think it was purely the Eagles and the Cowboys just conspired to hate on the Giants and said, listen, we're moving up. We're taking a guy ahead of them that we know they want.
Yeah, I think it was obvious that the Giants were probably going to take Devonta Smith if he was there. But in my opinion, and this is no knock on Smith at all, because obviously he's a great player, won the Heisman. But I like Kadarius Toney even more. So,
and if you can get Kadarius Toney and a first round pick the following year, you absolutely got to do that.
You have to do that. You have to do it and literally hope they don't change their mind at the last second. You have to get it done.
Yeah.
And look, if it breaks Urban Meyer's heart as well,
Yeah, and
added
he was
bonus.
picking at 25. He said he wanted Kadarius Toney, so I'm happy with that.
So the other team that I think at least me and Jake can agree on that we least like to talk about is, of course, the Dallas Cowboys. You touched on Micah Parsons. They obviously traded up to get him. They also had a ton of picks in this year's draft, and they kind of picked with all of them. They didn't like trade them away in bulk to move up in any one particular round. Do you feel like they did enough to claw back to kind of more in contention with Washington and with the Giants?
Oh, I mean, clearly, Cowboys' offense alone is good enough for 8 wins. I mean, they have one of the best offenses in the league, and there's no reason to think that it's going to slow down. It's only going to get better. You have another year with CD Lamb. You also have Dak Prescott back. So, the offense should gel a lot more this year and do better. They get some offensive linemen back. Byron Smith comes back. Like Martin comes back on the line. So that should help Zeke Elliott, kind of look like the Zeke Elliott of, past several years. He just didn't look good last year. So with all that said, we know it's about the defensive side of the ball. And they did try to address the defensive side of the ball. They drafted a corner as well. They drafted Jabril Cox, another linebacker from LSU, who's really good, by the way. But I think people have to keep in mind that, Dan Quinn now is the defensive coordinator in Dallas. And Dan Quinn, forget about the coaching stint in Atlanta. Think about him as a defensive coordinator with the Seahawks and how great those defenses were. So he's, looking to try to put his stamp on there, but they're going to a 3-4. So it's going to be, guys having to get used to that. DeMarcus Lawrence, his game will change a little bit. So it's going to be interesting with the Cowboys. But I truly feel like the NFC East across the board, every team helped their cause. Every team had strong drafts. I think Washington and the Giants, in my opinion, had the two best drafts. I think Washington was the best in the division. I think the Giants were second. I think the Cowboys were third, and I think the Eagles were fourth. I mean, and that's not a bad thing because both of them had good drafts. But if you had to rank them, that's the order I would give it to.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned about Dan Quinn, and I think the Micah Parsons pick was definitely a Dan Quinn style pick because that can be, if he wants to sort of recreate a sort of Legion of Boom in Dallas, like Micah Parsons is going to be his Bobby Wagner for sure. He's going to be that sort of guy for him. But I want to ask a question because would you think, because they did get Micah Parsons in the end, but all the talk was they wanted a cornerback in the first round. And do you think that if Surtain or JC Horn were available still at 10, they would have selected them, meaning that Philadelphia wouldn't have traded, and then maybe the Giants might have gotten Devonta Smith?
Yeah, I do. I think all of the above. I think that Dallas was definitely going corner first. I think Surtain was their guy all along. That's who they targeted. But it's not like they have a consolation prize. They got the best linebacker in the draft. With a tremendous upside. The only thing that concerns me, frankly, I know there was talk about character issues with Micah. Me being a Penn State guy, and I know people up there, football wise, that's the furthest thing from the truth. I mean, he had he did a dumb thing, that young people do in the locker room as far as horsing around hazing. I'm not condoning it at all. I'm not. But with that being said, character issues when a person's in trouble with the law all the time. A person's, constantly getting kicked out of practice, late for things. I mean, that's never been the case. This guy was an academic All-American too. So, I mean, let's give him some praise along before you give him all the scrutiny. But with all that said, Dallas isn't necessarily the atmosphere that you want to have a player in if you do have any kind of a red flag. And that's not to throw dirt on Dallas, but come on, it is what it is. I mean, Dallas has had some things happen, and they brought in some players that things didn't work out. So you just hope that this situation is not going to, repeat itself and be one of them.
Yeah, and with Dallas as well, they had the most picks in the division. I think actually had the most picks in the entire league over the weekend. For such a weird draft, you could say, that we came into with it's such a disjointed college year last year with all of these opt-outs as well. No full medicals, no combine.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's a lot of kind of, shots in the dark taken here because they can't fully scout the players as much as they would like.
Yeah, I mean, this has changed everything. I mean, the last 2 years for me alone, just from a coverage standpoint, draft night, I'm normally at the facility, we're there. But the last 2 years I've been home, you haven't been able to really get the interaction that you normally would have. So I can only imagine what it's like for the guys, for the players. I mean, I've talked to several players that have told me, it's different. Some of them like it, some of them don't. Some of it look at it like because they don't technically have to be in the facility all the time, in the off season. That's a good thing for them. Veterans don't want to be there. They want to be home resting up, getting themselves prepared, because after 3-4 years, you know what your body needs to do to get ready for upcoming season. So yeah, I think it definitely changed the way people could judge the talent. There was no combine this year, which changes things, because let's face it, if everyone had a pro day like a lot of these guys, we're gonna have records broken every year. Because those pro days, the 40 times and things of that nature, no, those are unofficial times. Let's face it. I mean, you can't have 300 pounds, 6'9" offensive tackles running 4 threes. That's not happening. So, but this is what I think has happened, guys. It's allowed for people to see who's really doing their homework. There's no reaching now. I mean, and I truly believe that. You can look at it the way you just explained it. You can reach on someone and say, because of COVID, I couldn't see him up close. No. It's the polar opposite. What it is now, because you can't see the guy, you have to do your homework on who it is you're getting ready to draft. And I mean down to the color socks their mom wears. I mean, you need to know everything possible about these players. And I think that's what's separating drafts from last year, drafts from this year. We're about to see who really hit, the nail on the head.
Yeah, and sticking on the draft there, I was surprised. Like, what I really liked was when Dave Gettleman drafted back, he got that first round for the following year. I was surprised at how many players were drafted. I was expecting more opt-ins, players that had played last year, to be drafted higher. Were you surprised, or was any thought about how many players that went high that opted out last season? Because it's obviously going to be a lot harder. You don't know how these guys have been taking care of their body. It's a lot harder to get that kind of handle on them. Or what was it, the idea on your side?
Well, see, I actually think that the players that opted out are probably going to be, I don't want to say ahead, because clearly if you haven't played for a year, football, wise, that's a little bit of a setback, but it's a minor setback, because most of the high-end guys that opted out knew they were going to be first-round draft picks, and high ones on top of that. So what those guys did was they got with trainers. They got with guys who work with other, great players, and, put them through workout regimens to actually get their body ready for what's getting ready to come up for them. And let's face it, a year out of anything that's physical, if you don't have to be physical for a full year, you've saved your body for one extra year for your career. So now an 18, 19-year-old, you look at 10 years, or maybe now they're going to give you 11, 12 years just because they didn't go through the wear and tear. And that's a good thing for me. If, if I was a GM, I'd like that, actually.
Mm-hmm. I think the Bosa's kind of set that precedent, didn't they, when they took their year out and led up to the draft and showed that year out doesn't take as much off the football side as maybe the coaches might have expected, and definitely let them progress their body. We're coming up to the end of our show. I want one last question. We're going to test you again one last time. Of the 5 quarterbacks taken in the first round, who's going to have the best rookie season, please? Because Jake would like to put some money on it.
For me, it's easy for me, and it's not Trevor Lawrence. I think he's going to have a good one, but I really like Zach Wilson. I really, really, really like Zach Wilson and what he brings to the table. And I think he's going to be finally in a stable setting in New York, with Robert Saleh being the coach now. I think that there's a plan. You can see the way they drafted, that they had a plan in place. And when they went out and got Eli, going brain dead here, the receiver from Ole Miss, that was a huge, huge pickup for them. You want to have a young guy that you can grow with if you're a young quarterback. And I think that was a good move for them. They also, picked up running back from North Carolina. So he's not just coming to New York with really nothing around him. They're going to be a much improved football team. I truly believe that. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do.
I think my most successful quarterback, I think, is Trey Lance. Just at the situation he's walking into is a lot better than any of the other quarterbacks walking into.
Yeah,
I don't think he's
think
going to
he'll
start
start
right away, though. Yeah, exactly. I don't think he's going to hit the field for a while, actually. And that's not because he's not good, but Garoppolo, unless they do trade Jimmy Garoppolo, I mean, the only reason I would think they would trade him is if somehow they maneuvered and got Aaron Rodgers. But this is the problem with that. If you bring Aaron Rodgers in, Aaron Rodgers already showed you he doesn't want anyone sniffing around him. So that wouldn't be necessarily a good thing for Trey Lance. So I don't see them going after Aaron Rodgers. I think Aaron Rodgers ends up as a Denver Bronco. He's going to be it's a Peyton Manning 2.0 all over again. So that's what's going to happen there. But look, I know before I get off, I've been waiting to ask you guys this because over here football reigns supreme, and over where you guys are, football reigns supreme, the different version. I need to get your takes on what in the heck is this super league thing. I mean, is that dead in the water now because people really shot it down?
It is dead, but like a good zombie film, they can come back to life.
As Game of Thrones said, what is dead may never die.
Yeah, like the owners of these teams, ironically enough, a lot of them own a lot of American franchises as well, whether it be baseball or football. They want to incorporate a NFL, MLB style in football in terms of because obviously of football over here there's relegation and sort of the money differs as well, so they just want to sort of maneuver it in the way that all the big teams would play each other all the time. They wanted pretty much an NFL where the 32 biggest sides play each other all the time. There's no relegation, there's no promotion, and they just get all the money, and then all the best players from other teams get brought to these big sides. But it's a lot more difficult, obviously, because you got colleges and drafting, and there's a lot of money involved with players as well over here too. So it was never really going to work. It was just a money grab by sort of owners to sort of maximize how much they could get out of their clubs. But it's not dead. It's definitely not dead. They'll definitely try and do it again.
I was super impressed though with the outcry of just fans and even players saying this isn't good for the sport over here. And over here, obviously, soccer it's maybe number 5 sport wise over here. No offense, it just is. And you got to win before people before they want to look and see what's going on. I know there was an American kid that scored, I think in the first English league, playoff game recently or whatever. And the irony is no one's ever heard of him over here. So anyway, but with that said, it wasn't enough teams, right? You didn't have enough teams in order to have a super league. You can't have 10 best teams playing each other every game. You need more teams, right?
So it was a little complicated. We have a knockout tournament that runs alongside of the domestic leagues in each of the countries, the Champions League. So it was originally set up as the winners of each league play each other. Essentially, this was going to start out as a tournament that played midweek during so all teams would still play in their domestic leagues, and they would use this as a kind of a Super Bowl version of the Champions League, where none of the smaller teams could get in, only these big teams. And then once they recruited enough teams, they would then move it on to a full-time league. So like Dara said, it's not dead yet because these massive clubs also owe a lot of money, and the standard revenue for them at the moment is just not good enough. The biggest guy is the guy who owns Real Madrid, obviously a global brand, but they are like billions of dollars in debt at the moment. So they're trying to find a way of getting out of that as quickly as they can. So as long as he still has debt, I think there's always a chance that this thing comes back.
Yeah, that's just not good because it kills the small market teams and communities that have probably rooted for their teams over 100 years.
Yeah,
It would be a death blow for some of those, and that's not cool. That's not cool
and
at all.
and soccer as well, particularly in the English league, but also in the other domestic leagues. It's built on this fact that an underdog can make a run at any time, right? It's the same. It's got the same nostalgia as the NCAA tournament in basketball, where okay, the big teams win it in the end, or every so often a tiny team gets really, really far, and everyone loves to see that, and it really adds. As much as everyone wants to see those massive world class players play each other every week, they also want to see those small teams, those minnows that have no chance, keep winning and winning and winning until someone finally gets over on them. So
Well, the government here stops monopolies. I mean, when someone takes over, they try to put other places out of business. The government steps in. So hopefully that happens over there. I mean, I'm not the big soccer guy like you guys are, but at the end of the day, over here, people were like, "Man, we've seen this story so many times over here, and it just never got off the ground." So maybe that stays on the ground over there.
For sure, fingers crossed, fingers crossed. But on this podcast, anyway, American football reigns supreme as number one. It's not number 5 or anything like that. So that's the main thing. But listen, before we wrap it up, where can people find your podcast or any of your work?
Sure. You can go to sportsjourney.com. We've got some great folks covering all of DC sports here, working for me, doing a really good job. You can check out my podcast at the After Practice Podcast with Lake Lewis, and then on Twitter at Lake Lewis, on Instagram, Facebook, Lake Lewis Jr. So I definitely appreciate you guys having me on today. I really do.
No problem. We really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us today, and we hope to speak to you again, if not before the season starts, definitely at some point during the year. Guys, before we go, very quickly, if you haven't already, can you please like this video and subscribe to the Dynamo Podcast Network? That's where you're going to find us on YouTube each and every time we upload a brand new show. Also do the same on the audio version. Just search Dynamo Podcast Network. You'll find us there. Again, every time we upload, you'll see us there. So we really appreciate the support. Also, facebook.com/undercenterpod. Twitter and Instagram at undercenterpod. That's where you're going to find us too. But that is all the time we have for Jake and Fionn. As always, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And guys, we'll be back soon with another show, so keep an eye out for that. But until then, stay safe and we'll see you soon.